Today is Jimmy Swaggart's burial. The preacher who once preached to millions is now being laid to rest. The man who once stood on stage with a Bible in one hand and tears in his eyes is gone. It's not just a funeral. It's a final chapter in a story full of hope, mistakes, faith, and forgiveness. His name once echoed in every American home, but now it rests quietly in the soil of Louisiana. Why does this moment matter? Why are thousands still talking about his death? Because the life Jimmy Swaggart lived on, the way it ended, tells us something important about people, about choices, and about second chances. Jimmy Swaggart was not an ordinary preacher. He was a television icon in the 1970s and 80s. His face appeared on screens across the country, preaching loudly, passionately, and emotionally. People felt connected to him. His church services weren't small. They were stadium-sized. His income once crossed $80 million a year, and his influence reached far beyond church walls. People gave their money, their time, their faith, believing in the power of his message. Jimmy used music, too. His piano playing became part of his sermons. His voice and his words moved people to tears. But with great power came great trouble. In 1988, Swaggart was caught in a scandal involving prostitution. He stood in front of cameras and cried, saying, "I have sinned against you, my Lord." The nation was shocked. Some forgave him, others walked away. His ministry took a hard hit. TV stations dropped his programs. Donations fell. But Swaggart didn't disappear. He kept preaching. Smaller crowds, fewer channels, but he never stopped. That is what made his final moments powerful. His funeral wasn't about a man who gave up. It was about a man who kept going. The burial took place in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. A white tent was set up at the Family Worship Center cemetery. The day was quiet but full of meaning. About 2,000 people attended, including family, old church members, and longtime followers. Some traveled across states. They came with flowers, pictures, and heavy hearts. There was no large stage or TV screen, just a simple wooden casket, a choir, and a few speakers. The funeral was not loud, but it was full of emotion. Donnie Swaggart, Jimmy's son, led the service. His voice cracked as he said, "We thank God for every tear Dad ever caused us, because every tear brought us closer to His grace." His wife, Frances, stood beside the casket. Her words were soft but powerful. Jimmy believed in miracles. People in the audience nodded, cried, and held hands. There were no famous politicians or celebrities, just believers remembering the man who once taught them about forgiveness. During the final prayer, church members laid white roses near the grave. Each rose symbolized purity, forgiveness, and peace. The choir sang a quiet hymn as the casket was lowered. It was a peaceful moment. No cameras flashed. No reporters shouted. For once, Jimmy Swaggart's story wasn't about a scandal. It was about peace. What made this funeral different? For one, it was simple. Many famous people have big, dramatic funerals. Think of Michael Jackson or Whitney Houston. Their funerals were broadcast around the world. But Jimmy chose a quiet goodbye. That choice said a lot. He wanted his final moment to be about God, not glory. It wasn't a show. It was a prayer. Many compared his farewell to that of Billy Graham. Graham's funeral had presidents in the front row. His impact was global. Jimmy's was smaller, but still powerful. Where Graham's service showed success, Jimmy's showed struggle and strength. Both had their place. But Jimmy's simple burial showed that a man can fall and still find peace. People in Baton Rouge shared stories about how Jimmy helped them. One woman named Linda said, "I lost my husband in 1992. Jimmy's message helped me get through it." Another man said, "I was on drugs. His preaching made me clean." These weren't headlines. They were real people with real pain. Jimmy's words touched them. And even after his fall, they came back to thank him. Some church members who had left after the scandal came back for the funeral. One man said, "He messed up. So did I. But he showed us you can get back up again." That's the kind of message people held on to. Not perfection, but hope. The funeral also reminded people how much one person can change a community. Jimmy wasn't alone. His wife, Frances, stood by him through everything. His son Donnie kept the church going. Their loyalty turned a broken ministry into a place of healing again. Their story wasn't just about Jimmy. It was about a family who stayed strong when everything around them broke. Still, some things were missing. The funeral, though emotional, repeated the same words: faith, grace, forgiveness. It would have been stronger with more personal stories. Maybe a letter from someone he helped. A child whose family got food because of his church, or a pastor inspired by Jimmy to start his own ministry. Real stories connect more than just repeated phrases. There were also not enough direct quotes. We heard a few from family, but not from the people whose lives were changed. A woman once told a newspaper, "Jimmy gave my son a second chance when no one else would." That quote didn't make it into the service, but it should have. It showed the real power of his work. We also needed more focus on the people around him. Frances Swaggart stood strong for decades. Her loyalty helped rebuild their image, worked hard to keep the church open. Their efforts deserved more attention. Jimmy may have been the face, but they were the heart of the ministry. But even with those missing parts, the funeral gave one strong message: grace is bigger than failure. Jimmy's life had highs and lows, but his end was peaceful. That tells us something important. Let's take a moment to compare again. Think of Jim Bakker, another preacher who faced scandal. But Bakker's later years were full of business deals, survival shows, and selling emergency food. Jimmy focused more on preaching. Even after the world turned away, he stayed behind the pulpit. That choice shaped his final goodbye. The funeral wasn't only about Jimmy. It was about every person who ever messed up and wanted to start again. About every pastor who lost his way. About every believer who doubted and returned. His story became theirs. Imagine a man named Ryan. He left the church in 1990 after Jimmy's scandal. He felt hurt, angry, betrayed. He said, "I realized I was judging someone for doing what I've done myself. That wasn't fair." Ryan sat in the funeral crowd, silent but healing. That's the power of a humble burial. It doesn't shout. It listens. Jimmy Swaggart's funeral wasn't flashy, but it was full of heart. It told a story of falling and rising, of mistakes and mercy. It showed that even if the world turns its back on you, God might not in the days after the burial. The Family Worship Center received hundreds of letters, emails, and messages from people around the world. Some had never met Jimmy Swaggart. Others had been part of his ministry years ago. One message said, "He made mistakes, but he also made me believe again." Another read, "I was a broken teenager when I first heard his voice on TV. That voice gave me the strength to live." These messages show how a person's impact can last even after they are gone. A funeral may be one day, but the memories and emotions it brings live on for years. Even younger generations who didn't grow up watching Jimmy found meaning in his story. A young preacher named Marcus shared online, "I studied his sermons for years. I learned not just what to say, but how to say it with heart." Marcus said he never agreed with everything Jimmy preached, but he respected how he never stopped trying. This kind of legacy is rare. Most people are remembered for one moment. Jimmy is remembered for many, good and bad. And it's that full picture that makes his story real. Some people criticized the funeral for being too soft, too forgiving. They felt it didn't address the hurt caused by the scandals. But others said, that's not what funerals are for. They're for healing, not punishment. As one pastor put it, if we can't find peace at a funeral, then when can we? This honest divide shows that Jimmy Swaggart's life still creates strong feelings. And that might be the truest sign of his impact. He still makes people talk, think, and feel even after death. So now it's your turn to think. Do you believe a man can fall so far and still be used by God? Do you believe in forgiveness even when the whole world is watching? And when you look at your own life, do you give up after one mistake, or do you keep going? Jimmy Swaggart's life is over, but his story is not. The story is now yours to carry. Thank you for listening. If you felt something today, you remembered someone, or forgave someone, share it. Let others know how faith and failure shaped your journey to dot. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this about people who fall, rise, and live with meaning. Let's talk again soon.